I actually never met my father. I grew up, is this good?
Yeah.
Okay. I never met my father. I grew up to a single mom. She had 3 daughters by the time she was age 22, 3 different fathers, and grew up in San Bernardino kind of with my mom and her various men that were in and out of our life. And I never met my dad. And so just kind of tough childhood. With my 2 sisters and my mom, moving around a lot of different men and people in and out of our lives.
So what was the age difference again between the sisters and you?
My sisters and I are about 2 years apart each.
Okay.
So it's kind of one right after the other, and all 3 different fathers. So my older sister met her father a little bit later in my life, or in her life, and we actually lived with my younger sister's father for up until I was about 5 or 6 years old. He was extremely abusive, and it was a really scary life for us. I remember there were instances when I was, 5, 6 years old, seeing him with, a knife to my mom's throat, threatening to kill her. And we had bars on the windows, so we had no way to escape. So it was just very violent and very abusive situation.
Golly, that's got to be like major at that age.
It was really tough, and she ended up getting out of that relationship right into another domestic violent relationship. And the next one that she got into, I didn't realize it at the time, and I really looked up to my stepdad, but he was it was kind of a molestation type thing, not with like penetration, but he would do some things that now as an adult, I realized he had a perverted mind, and he
very
was
inappropriate.
Mm-hmm, yeah. He was taking advantage of the fact that she had these 3 young girls and she was a single mom, and he was able to get us in the home, and he was extremely abusive to my mom and to my sisters and I as well.
Oh my God, that like makes me sick. So what age were you at that time frame and your sisters?
So when we got to, she actually went from one to the next, and in a lot of the cases with the men, it was overlapping.
But this particular...
the stepdad, that was probably, I would say about 6 until I was 8 or 9. Yeah.
Wow.
And then we kind of kept in touch with him throughout the years. He ended up passing away young. But we kept in touch with him throughout the years because, like I said, to us, that was like the only dad we knew. Yeah. And so it wasn't until I got older that I realized what had been happening, especially when I became a mom of daughters myself. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? I don't know why I looked up to him so much. I don't know why I called him my dad. He was actually very abusive to us, and he did some really disgusting things to us and to my mom. So he was an alcoholic, and he ended up passing away in his early 30s from cirrhosis of the liver. The
event that we really cover within the book and stuff, where you're taken to a homeless shelter. So what led to that event?
So this is where, as I turned around 14 years old. My mom started taking us to church for a little while. And at the church was when I started to see that our life was different from everyone else's. Prior to that, most of the people we were around had similar situations and similar lifestyles. Yeah. And to us, the abuse, all of the stuff we were enduring was normal because the other kids in our life were dealing with that as well. But when I started going to church, I was getting exposed to kids who had a little bit more normalcy in their life. And so I started to realize that ours was not normal. Yeah. And I would get the courage to speak up. At 14, 15 years old. When I was 14, my mom, there was one night where I decided to write a letter to her and tell her she had been at work all night and we didn't have any toilet paper. And so we had to go to the next door neighbor and ask for toilet paper. So I was embarrassed. I was really embarrassed by it because we had toilet paper in the house. We just couldn't get to it. So I wrote her a long note. I had the courage to write this note. And I go to bed, and the routine was that in the middle of the night when my mom would get home from work, I would wake up. I could hear the garage, and I would wake up, and I would go into survival mode and lay there and wait for my beating. I was used to getting beat in the middle of the night when she would get home from work.
Are you kidding me?
And it was bad.
I mean, how old were you?
14 years old. 13, 14 years old. So she was working as a bartender, and in the middle of the night, she would come home and the garage door was right next to my bedroom door.
So you knew then
that I was going to get beat in the middle of the night. So she would come home, and I have like this instinct, like I can actually tell when a car is near. Like I've developed this instinct to be able to tell when there's a car pulling up to the house. So she would pull up, I'd wake up in the middle of the night, and I would just lay there and wait, and I would kind of listen, like, does she have somebody with her? Does she sound like she's in a good mood or a bad mood? And just wait to see if she was going to burst in the room and rip me out and start beating me. And so that was kind of the norm at the time. And so this night, and then I would have to go back to bed and wake up in the morning a couple hours later and go to school and act like nothing had happened. So this was a tough part of my childhood. So I write a letter to her, a long letter saying, you know, you treat us like prisoners, you lock everything up, this is not the way that we should be living. And I go to bed and I lay awake and I wait for the beating, because I know, like, this one's definitely, I mean, if the sponge, you know, not being rinsed off is a reason for her to beat me, she's sure as heck going to beat me for this letter. She didn't. That night, she did not. And so I laid there in fear the whole night, waiting for my beating. I didn't get it. The next morning I wake up, the letter's still sitting where I left it, so she must not have read it. So I had an opportunity to take it away, and for some reason I chose to leave it there and go to school. And sure enough, school lets out, and there's my mom standing at the gate waiting for me.
not typical.
Not typical.
Oh, wow.
Like, I don't think she ever picked me up from school. And this was going to be a walk home, because I would walk home from school. So she actually beat me in front of everybody the entire way home from school, walking in front of people. Was just beating me like, you think you're tough. And so we get to the house, and like, we have bunk beds. And so I sit on the bottom bunk, and she's beating me. And for the first time in my life, I'm a very empathetic person. I was always one who would go into the fetal position. I never talked back. I never fought back. I was that kid that was just always scared. For the first time in my life, I just cocked my fist back, and I was like, you will never hit me again. And I've got like blood dripping down my face, because she wore a lot of rings. And so when she would punch me close fist in the face, it would leave marks on my face. And so I'm sitting there like with my fist cocked back, like bigger than my mom, she's small, and she just stops like in shock. And we're both sitting there, and it's almost like a divine intervention. All of a sudden the doorbell rings, and she goes to the door, and it's two of my friends from church. I think they got word that I was getting beat on the way home, and they stopped to see if I was okay. So I'm sitting in the bed shaking, not sure what's about to happen, and she lets me go out there and talk to them with the blood on my face after I had just gotten beat. And she goes in her room, and she's like, go, just go, do whatever you want, I don't even care anymore. So I go outside, and I start talking to my friends, telling them what had happened, and we're naive, and we came up with this plan. You know, we're gonna pick you up in the morning, and we're gonna go get you emancipated, and you're gonna, you know, start your new life. And so we tried that. So the next day, I packed my bag, but instead of putting my books in it, I put my clothes in it, and I go to walk to school like I normally would, and they come and they pick me up. And they take me, because this was my church friends, so they take me to the church family, and the pastor of the church actually gets involved. He contacts CPS, and CPS says, okay, we've made a report. You don't have to take her back home, because there's an official report on file. She's safe to go to church tonight and stay with you guys while we investigate the situation. So I go to church. And my mom knew that, like, I wasn't going to miss church for anything. And so she knew she was going to find me there that night. So she shows up to the church with the police, and somehow they weren't able to find this CPS.
Oh, it just went mysteriously disappeared.
Yeah, it just disappeared. And so here I am in the church feeling safe, protected, and the cops are out there arguing with the pastor of the church. And the pastor comes in, and he gets me, and, you know, he's crushed. You could tell he's just crushed. He felt like he failed me, you know, like if I had known this would have happened, we wouldn't have had her sitting in this church. We would have had her hidden away somewhere, because they knew the abuse. They knew the level of abuse. I was actually dating his son, so they knew more than anyone what was going on. Yeah. And so he comes in and he says, we're going to do something that I normally wouldn't tell someone to do, but we're going to lie. And he was like, you're going to tell the cops that if they take you home, you're going to kill yourself. And that's the only way we can save you from going home tonight, because they'll take you to a hospital instead. And so we did that. So I go there and I say, if you take me home, I'll kill myself. My mom's outside laughing. just laughing and joking with the cops, and she thinks it's funny, and she's like, she'll never do that, you know, kind of like joking about it. They put me in the back of the cop car and they take me to a mental hospital. So strip me down, you know, check everything, and they put me in a room in the mental hospital. And overnight, I spent the night there. The next day, they returned me to my mom, sent me back home with her. A cop escorted us home back to her house. And so I'm trying to tell the cop, you know, all the things that are going on. And I remember laying in the bed and listening to my mom and the police officer talk, like right at the door, and laughing and joking. And she's basically won him over. And I hear him say, if she was my daughter, I would beat her too. The cop, the police officer who I thought was going to protect me. So after that, there was kind of a series of my mom sending me to live with people. She sent me to live with her sister for a little while. When she sent me to live with her sister, her older sister, this is the one that had gotten pushed out of the home. And so they had kind of a dysfunctional relationship. But my aunt was an Air Force, a retired Air Force. I think she was like an E8 or E9. And so my aunt said, send her to me. I'll whip her into shape. You know, I'll take care of her. I'll get her.
Like as if that's the problem.
Yeah.
No, so but did the aunt? So the aunt only saw the perspective of your mom.
I don't even know if that was the case. I don't know if she said that just to get me out of the home.
Okay.
Because I didn't live that kind of life when I got with her. It was a dream.
Okay.
I felt so safe. She was wonderful to me. She treated me like it was amazing. And I had a good life with her. You know, it was healthy. She let me explore my artistic talents. She took me to get my hair done. You know, I lived more of a normal life with my aunt. But for some reason, my mom thought that I was going to live like a worse life. You know, she's going to be military on you and you're going to hate it. And so I lived with my aunt for a while. Because they had a contentious relationship, like there would be times where my aunt would refer to my mom as my sister. And so there was some weirdness there where I think even at times she saw me as my mom. I don't know. It was very odd, but she was really good to me. And my mom found out that I was actually having a good experience there and not a bad one. And so guess what? She shows up with the cops to pick me up. And my aunt didn't want me to go back home. And so she's out there pleading with the police. My mom, again, is laughing and joking with the cops. And she almost sounded like she might have been either drunk or high. And so my aunt asked the cops, we cannot send her home. It's not safe for her. What can we do? Like, is there anything we can do to not send her back home? Because I'm afraid for her if she goes back. And they said the only way is if when we go inside, she's not there. So it's like 8 o'clock at night, pitch black. My aunt lives on it's like Laguna Niguel, so it's like a mountaintop kind of hill, and in a condo. And so in the front of the condo, it's like on one level of the street, and then the back of the condo is like another level. And so she comes inside and she tells me what the cops said, and she said, run, just run. We'll come find you. So here I am, like 15 years old, barefoot, shorts and a tank top, and I run just from the police, from my mom, from everybody. And I run down the mountain and just, I don't even know how I did it. And I find a lit shopping center. And so I'm like, run into the shopping center and I see a Kinko's, and they had a huge potted plant. And so I go and I just hide behind the potted plant. I'm barefoot and I'm just hiding behind this huge plant. And the cops are there, and they're out there with their spotlight, and they actually put the spotlight on me, and the cop made eye contact with me, and he looked away, and they left. And so, like, that was an instant where, you know, you hear about police officers who do wrong. You know, my mom was actually dating one who was abusive, but this was one where I felt like they protected me. They knew, because they had seen her behavior. They didn't want me going home, looked at me in the eyes and just drove away. And so I was able to get a hold of my aunt, and they sent someone down to pick me up, and they moved me to my aunt's girlfriend's house. She was a lesbian, and so they moved me to her house, and I lived there for a little while. After that, you know, while I was living there, it just got to the point where they couldn't get me into school, and I was just sitting at the house all day, and nobody knew what to do with me. Like, I was in hiding. And so they were able to get in touch with a friend of mine's family and get me moved back to my hometown, where I could at least go back to the school that I was enrolled in. My mom knew that I was there, and she was allowing me to stay there for a while, but she was making it hard for them. She wouldn't turn over the rights, and she wouldn't allow them to do, to have some of the parental rights that they needed. And so I ended up getting sent back to her house. So after I ended up back at my mom's house, again, she never put her hands on me again. That one instance where I cocked my fist back, that was the last time my mom has ever put her hands on me. When I got back to her house, though, it was tough living there, and I felt in fear. I didn't know what would happen. So I ended up, me and my little sister got in a fight, and my sister called my mom and was, kind of crying to her, saying, we got in a fight. And my mom said something along the lines of like, I'm gonna beat your ass when I get home. And I got scared, and I ran away again. And so this time when I ran away, I didn't have anyone to go to. Everyone had been pushed out of our life. All these people that had tried to help were pushed out. I had no one left. So I found some...
Pushed out, or did they choose to?
Yeah, did they set a boundary?
Yeah.
They set boundaries. Yeah, pushed out in that, like the church was afraid. I think there was some threats made against the church that if you guys keep intervening, I'm going to make these threats. All the people who had tried to be there they had to preserve themselves. Yeah. Now, for me, I felt failed, right? Because I was young and I needed these people and I looked to them. And so I didn't understand those boundaries. I just knew that all these adults that I thought were going to protect me and help me just keep disappearing.
Yeah.
So I just kept feeling abandoned, one after the next, And so now here we are. I run away. I don't have anywhere to go. I end up, kind of just couch surfing with high school friends. Nobody that truly cared about me, not anyone that loved me, And end up at a house party. And like, I was very strong in my faith. I didn't typically do anything. Like I was absolutely not sexually active. I didn't drink or do drugs or anything like that. So I end up at this house party and everybody's drinking, and I decided to drink. And I ended up being date raped that night by a classmate. And that was my first sexual experience. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was kind of almost like, I don't want to say blackout drunk because I remember the details, and so I wasn't blacked out, but I wasn't able to physically defend myself. And I pushed him off of me several times, but I wasn't strong enough to keep him off of me. And so the next day I ended up going and telling, an acquaintance or a friend what had happened, and we got to call your mom, we have to call your mom. That's all we can do. And so like any teenager, even though I was enduring abuse, even though I didn't trust my mom, like this is a moment where I need my mom. And so we go back to my mom, and I go back home, and, they do the rape kit, they file a police report. And I remember laying on my mom's lap crying, and she's there, and she says, "Are you happy now? You're just another statistic." And then she ends up arranging to drop me off at the homeless shelter. And after she dropped me off, she, dropped the charges against the guy who had raped me, because I guess she didn't want to believe that it happened, or she didn't want to deal with it, or maybe she just didn't want people probing into her own life. But that's what resulted in me being dropped off.